Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here, the man who talks to machines. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I wanted to revisit Paul Dong and his Chi Gong book here that I reviewed a few weeks ago. And there's lots of exciting information in this. This is probably the best book on Qigong you're going to find. Now, Paul Dong is an interesting man who actually brought Qigong to the United States, to San Francisco, many years ago. And being Chinese and originally born in China, I believe, he has a unique perspective because he knows all the masters there. He also can read the language and get much of the literature. So he's about as credible as you can get, but we always have to understand the fantasy, egotistical, nationalistic factor that everybody has except Americans. And that is the fact that they believe that they know everything. And as a Qigong master that I met, when I was, who kind of I could talk to, not really because they don't really speak English very well. And this is a problem if you're going to be a communicator and develop your systems in the United States, which he was unable to do, mostly because of his lack of being able to communicate. Going through translators and everything else is a real problem. Now, Paul Dong has translated a lot of important texts. Particularly, I believe it's the Super Spies of China, and references a lot of Chinese information, which very little of that has ultimately been translated, even though there is a couple of presses that have done that. I believe, I can't remember the name of the press. There was one out of Colorado who has a lot of Chinese texts that have been translated and co-written with the Chinese. And of course, this is always a problem. Even in the information age, very little is actually translated from other languages. And one of this has to do with the fact that is there a market for it that you're going to spend a lot of money to publish and translate books for. And generally, the markets are pretty small when you get into all these things. But there's an interesting literature out there if you really hunt. I still believe that just about 99.9% of everything has been published somewhere. There are very few secrets out there, but there certainly are secrets, and there's a lot of people who have never written anything. I have 30 years worth of information that no one else knows, that I've never written down anywhere or even passed on, period. It's a problem. It's a problem doing this because it's a full-time job to release information. And if you want to put it in writing, it's even more work. Of course, formatting, writing, and everything else is really a very arduous and difficult, time-consuming task to get it all done proper and everything else, even though it's much easier in this day and age because we have vanity presses. I mean, you can have your books printed for free and sold instantly on Amazon and other presses, and it costs you nothing. But it does cost you in time and energy, and you have to do all that stuff. And, book editing and formatting is quite a pain in the butt. And if you have somebody else do that for you, you're looking at hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. But getting past that, so Paul Dong was really, and it's hard to believe in this day and age, you can look back and talk about the 80s and even 90s and say that's a long time ago, but it is. And before that, there was very little about almost anything. I remember in the 80s and even the 90s trying to hunt up occult information, and you had very difficult reasons finding it. None of the grimoires, or I should say very few of them, were translated. It was very difficult to actually get English translations of most of the famous grimoires. I was the first one to translate them all. And publish them, as well as publishing varied courses. You generally couldn't get a course in one type of occult tradition, or I should say many types of occult traditions in one place. I offered that as well. Generally, you had to go to one person who taught that particular tradition. So these are all the things this isn't that long ago. Of course, the internet now is filthy, polluted with endless amounts of information, and almost all of it is pretty poorly done. And the more free it is, the worse it is. And they're all gimmicks and things, and people have taken classic books and have put it up there for themselves and manipulate to get your money out of you. But none of these people are really masters or serious about the subject matter, and you generally get a really ton of garbage. keeping that in mind, we have to look at the fact of that what is going on here. So, what is going on here is getting quality information. So, now, Paul Dong knows it. He's also got an Oriental mind. And I think he's fairly honest, particularly if you're a careful researcher and reader like I am. Meaning the fact you can read into his tests, and he gives his personal opinions, which are pretty much part of the Oriental mindset towards the West. And that is they don't particularly like the West. And almost nobody in the world likes Americans. Nobody's overly interested in translating things into English, but of course it has to go to America because that's where the money is. You got to remember, America is the third most populous country in the world. It's a huge market. If we throw in the pseudo English speakers, the British, the Australians, etc., that speak an old backward language of English, you have a pretty large market. And of course, English is the international language because it's so simple, smart, and just really a great language that isn't filthed up with all the nonsense that you get, particularly around the world and particularly in Europe, where everything's everything's either basically female, male, or in between. So the whole idea is these kind of things are just absurd, but it shows you the kind of inferior mind there is in Europe and around the world, which includes the inferior languages of places like India that do the same thing with Sanskrit. So when we get into all these things, we have to understand that. So he gives his one and he says, a lot of Chinese are not interested in teaching Westerners. They don't think they're good students. They're not going to put in the time and energy. Well, a lot of that's true. On the other hand, I've always rebelled against spending my lifetime learning a skill that I don't really know whether it will ever benefit me. But this is very much involved in the Asiatic mind, which will dedicate themselves and also have traditions. They also that are passed down in families. So these things are kind of done like you pass down anything in a family. And it also seems to be something that they're able to do with a simple lifestyle, that they're able to devote a lot of time to your practices. But, a lot of people in the West go to the gym for 2 or 3 hours a day. That time would probably be better spent doing Qigong work and some exercise as well. I'm very much of an internationalist on that. I don't believe in staying with one particular thing. You should be very varied so you build all of your energies. So I mean, it's not exactly 100% true. I don't know anybody who's good at anything that doesn't spend hours and hours at it. Now, they may have some natural abilities, but it doesn't mean that they aren't putting in training time. You could say that Tiger Woods, who from a child was trained in golf and had some natural abilities, or at least built-in abilities as young. He doesn't sit around at night. He trains. He'll hit golf balls for 6-8 hours a day. So the whole idea is that's what you do to become a master. So we have to understand that, of course, this seems to be something the West has kind of forgotten, yes and no. You're not a bodybuilder because you work out for 2 hours a day. So there are people doing things to extreme levels. Also, there's an acceptance of energies and everything else that a lot of Westerners don't really understand the flow of energies. They're all stuck in the meathead, rockhead reality of life, perpetrated by a very bogus, evil scientific system that is steeped in dogma worse than religion. So when we get into Paul Dong is interesting, but he is very much of a nationalist, like everybody else is except Americans. So he thinks the Chinese are the best thing since sliced bread, and they know everything. Well, the Chinese are one of the great societies. There basically are 3 great societies, or you could say 4, which is the Chinese, the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans. These are the people who built the world. We have to understand that everything comes from these basically 3 or 4 cultures, because you could say the Greek-Roman culture are very similar, even though if you look at Greece today and Italy today, it's Tijuana and Beverly Hills, baby. So the Greeks, of course, have never really gone anywhere or done anything. You'd be hard-pressed to say anything that a Greek has achieved in the last 1,000 years after their heyday in ancient Greece. And, of course, this comes from a lot of reasons, particularly the fact that they were invaded by foreign cultures and everything else. The Islamic factor that the Greeks are involved in has pretty much destroyed their consciousness. So as we move into these realities, we have to understand that. So Paul really is the official person out there. I don't know if he's still alive or not. If you know if he's still alive or not, leave that in the comments down below. He must be quite up there if he is, but he could be a person that easily lives to be 100 plus. But what he talks about here to get into the meat of this book is that, of course, he personally developed empty force, which is building energies that you then can affect somebody or actually hit them at a distance. There are many people, hundreds if not thousands of people listed in the literature from Asia stating that this is possible and has been done. There are lots of masters who've demonstrated this. Unfortunately, the film that goes around that is pushed by the dumb bunker, the really evil people of this planet, the pseudoscientists and those people who paid by the corporations to disempower you, have pushed certain things out there to show that this is kind of silly and that it doesn't work, and they disgraced one of the major, always forget that guy's name, basically he's an American who is an official and a well-known and thought of highly martial artist, but he made his money by claiming that you can hit people at a distance or just touch them and fall down. Yet when he's asked to do any of this, he was unable to do it, particularly when he was filmed by National Geographic. He looked like a complete fool. Then he made up all sorts of excuses, making it look worse. I tend to think now that this may have been all staged and planned, that he may have been threatened, etc. Who knows? But the bottom line is that this is a fantasy in his mind. And when you go out and say you can do stuff, I mean, you're going to have to prove it. If you make claims, you get ready to prove those claims and demonstrate it. Oh, the person who disgraced everything was George Dillman, who was a noted author. He's made a fortune in martial arts, and in the martial arts community, he's known as a talented, high-ranking martial artist. That doesn't mean that he can do the knockdown touch, but every martial artist understands that as any evolution in their training knows that this is something that does happen accidentally and can be planned on to do. And ultimately, the ultimate martial artist is a person that doesn't use his muscles. Muscles are just the result of the energy that you generated internally being projected through muscles and limbs. Ultimately, you should be able to short circuit the muscles, the limbs, the bones, take the energy at the core of everything and have that affect your opponent. So if you're any kind of a thinker, you would think that. But, most martial artists like Dillman are kind of a little doofuses, just like Joe Rogan. Let's punch something. They have big, giant egos. And why would you train yourself like this? Well, it really is to develop a bad attitude in general, like Joe Rogan has. When you really look at Joe Rogan, he's very arrogant in his own way. And he likes the fact that he knows that he can hurt any average person out there. But Joe, just remember, a lot of people carry guns. So your little footy to think that you're going to hit somebody in the head with that is going to be blown off. But this is, of course, the weakness of all martial arts in a world of guns and other things. And, of course, we have to fully understand that. But Paul Dong, of course, wrote the book Empty Force, several others. And, of course, I think his premier book is Chi Gong here that you're seeing right in front of you. This is a relatively rare book, but if you hunt around for it, I've seen it available at fairly decent prices. So you can hunt this up. I don't know if you can find it other places. Remember, check places like archive.org, the Internet Library, and other places to see if you can find. This is out of print and has been for years. And remember, books that are out of print, nobody makes any money from. So when you buy a used book, you're just making the guy who owns that rich. It's not going to the author. It's not going to the publisher. You're not helping anybody but that person reselling the book. So the fact of getting books in other places that are long out of print and thinking that this somehow hurts the industry of the author is a fantasy. So the whole idea is that as we get in, but he states here that he has witnessed it, he has documentation from many people, and that the actual touchless knockout is 100% proven, and it depends upon your skill. He also states that this could take many, many years to develop. A minimum to do even some of the basic stuff is 3 to 5 years of doing Qigong every day. So the whole idea is that he's not whitewashing this with some sort of fantasy system that a lot of people want to sell you. That's going to tell you how to do this within a couple of months. And of course, that's what we all want. And, I'm one of those too. But the whole idea is that's not really the truth out there to develop any kind of extreme abilities. It usually takes a lot of work, and we're trying to get past all this, of course, with my new Fire Dragon scalar machine. We'll be able to do virtually miracles in the future by using it simply. But the core of these machines, they're consciousness machines. They're working through you. Junk in, junk out. So machines have to also be empowered by a person of high realities and empowerment to get the kind of results that you want. But he definitely mentions this. He definitely himself is able to do it. I've never seen him personally. I don't think there's any film on him. As he said, all his stuff is going back 20, 30, 40 years ago. So as he said, I believe he's probably not even living anymore. But there doesn't seem to be any film on him doing anything, which is really unfortunate. And there isn't film much on anybody doing anything except for the discredited Dillman, who failed, who he didn't fail, but he had one of his top students fail, and then he made up excuses like a babbling boob. So the whole idea is we really have problems there, but that doesn't in any way mean that something isn't possible. It's like saying that a magician can imitate a psychic, and that means that psychic powers don't exist. Well, that's a simpleton way of looking at things, and we have an awful lot of simpletons backed up by simpletons, otherwise known as scientists, who believe in dogma of the fools. So the whole idea is that we have to. So he talks about that. One of the other interesting things is he talks about the testing of a Qigong machine. Now, I saw these many years ago, and I don't know if they're still out there. If someone else knows where there's a Qigong machine, let me know. And I've seen these here in different places, and I believe they had the more advanced machines are like $3,000 or $4,000. So I don't think they were very popular in general. So I don't know if those are still the machines or not. I don't think he gives an actual trade name, but this book is filled with everything. It also gives you the basic Qigong systems to do, particularly what he calls standing on the pole, which he uses an empty force. Now, he believes that Qigong, standing on the pole, which is just basically standing, drawing in energies with your legs or your knees slightly buckled or bent, and your arms bent to grab the chi. He believes that this is the number one and best way, all those people out there. So couldn't be any easier than that. But again, you're going to have to stand there for long periods of time as well. And there's a whole bunch of things you're doing mentally and everything else. You're not thinking of your grocery list or whether you want to get a whiskey or who you're going to hump that day. The whole idea is that all those things have to be out of the mind and be in a pure state. But he claims in his book that the testers in China were getting an 86% success rate using the actual machine. Well, if this is true, then this is something that everybody should own because you can then produce the results of a master using a machine. This is what we try and do in the West. The whole idea is our species basically are very cunning. They're not smart, they're cunning. And the whole idea is that what you do as a human, because you have hands and feet, is that you make tools. With tools, you make machines. That is the process that's brought us to where we're at. And if we weren't so corrupt, we'd be ruling the universe and we would have no problems. But that's another story. So he talks about all that. He gives you a lot of information in this book. If you're going to get a book, hunt this up, spend a little extra money, and use this book. There's thousands of books on Qigong, and most of them are pretty poor. They're written badly. I mean, he's about the best authority you're going to get. He's gotten all his information directly from China, and so he has tapped into the masters there, which of course is one element of learning that you want to do. Of course, you're always looking for the hybrid people who've taken the information like I do and transferring it into more Western modern realities and gives you a hybrid, more powerful system. But this book is very fascinating. He talks about that. He gives names and books and everything else in here of people who've done this. And there certainly are masters out there that can do all of this. As I said, everybody suffers from the same kind of egotistical mental illness, thinking that their race, for some reason, is so superior and they know everything. And this is a real problem. Of course, it's a problem with everybody. The Asians, of course, think this. The Latins are delusional, believing in every little thing's a mystic reality. We have all these problems that you run into depending on the culture. And of course, let's not forget the mystical or magical thinking that we get from people that believe in religion. I mean, to believe in the comic book stories that all religions give you is the epitome of stupidity. So these people actually believe in this and are dangerous to listen to or follow anything that they tell you. So we have to be very careful of all those things that come with that. So he has that. Everybody has that. Pretty much anybody into these traditions. They're very, very nationalistic. They're very, very racist. And that's how people go through life and make judgments. I'm always amused why people think it's only so-called Celtic people, otherwise known white people, not your fake or Arabic whites that people think are white, which aren't. So the whole idea is that it's always blaming these kind of people that somehow they have a exclusivity from. They have a license to be racist, which of course couldn't be further from the truth. The Raza, the Mexican America or Mexican club, which is highly racist against non-Mexicans and very violent, so it is thought, certainly is. And every culture has this. So it's really sad to do that. So, but this clouds your thinking. And this is a problem with everybody because they believe in something, so they're going to make all sorts of excuses of why their is better. Well, I don't believe in anything. I believe in proof. I believe when it happens to me personally and I can witness it and have the knowledge to judge whether there's tricks involved, because you got a lot of people who are scum. They're called stage magicians. Penn and Teller, and all those, the unamazing Randy, these people are evil as far as I'm concerned and distort what is critical information and guidance that we need in the future to evolve to a higher state. These people have decided to keep us in the sewer while they make hundreds of millions of dollars off their goofy little skills and trickery. It's really sad. But definitely, this is a book. You got a lot of little gems in this book. I just can't say enough about this book. If you're interested in Qigong and basic energies, there's really no better book than this, written in a very nice fashion as well. It's very easy to understand. He gives a lot of details. If you're a bibliography type guy, or want to tell everybody where you stole your information from, there is a fair amount in this as well. But he does name names and books and everything else. Most of these books are not available in English. Some of them maybe. There's a huge amount of information available in these areas. Very detailed. I've talked about other books. But this is a study unto itself. And you're going to have to devote a lot of time. The whole idea with Dragon Force Tech that's coming out is to cut through all this to a degree. You still have to make yourself a huge consciousness empowered person so you can take that energy and put it through the machines as well. So nothing is a flip of the switch. Magic lamps do not exist. So again, this is a classic book. It goes into so much information here, but I did want to pass along the fact that apparently there is a Qigong machine out there. These things have been tested fairly well in China itself, and where all this goes, we don't know, because this information is about 30 years old now to begin with. So it keeps going on and on, if not longer, of where does all this go? And, things are only as live as long as the person who keeps it alive. So a lot of these things are easily poo-pooed by very ignorant people that know nothing about anything. And you get these pseudo-intellectual, semi-tech people, like people that think they are computer programmers and think that somehow that means that they have some intelligence past the stupid math they do. And programmers programming a computer, while it may be complex, is a skill that just about anybody can learn. And there's nothing about it that involves any level of consciousness. It's about learning a skill and converting dots and dashes into what is actually into software text, into programs. And this is not something that is all that difficult once you learn it. Like everything else, there isn't something there that is overly creative. And certainly, if you're dealing with this, it's very much of a dogma, because one little item wrong in any kind of code and it doesn't work. So it has to be precise, and it has to be precise as the programmer is told to make it precise. So when you get in these areas, you limit what goes on in the bigger picture. So we have to understand all of that. But as I said, this is a fantastic book. Everybody should get this and read it. This is a really definitive book on the energies of acupuncture, acupressure, everything that go into the understanding that. There's a few other good books I will be highlighting, but this is really a definitive book, and he's probably the best author out there, and certainly has the background to do this. He seems to be well versed in English, has spent most of his life here in the San Francisco area, and as he said, he was the person who brought Qigong and actually was teaching it, out of all places, the YMCA and what was it, San Rafael or somewhere up near San Francisco, where there's a huge Asian community, as there is in all of California. Yet what's interesting is that as a person who's lived there most of his life, you never run into any Asians unless you live in their particular town. Very interesting. I think my high school had one Japanese girl in it, and that was it, even though there's a few here and there. But generally, they stay in their own little communities. They are very high income earning people, with the average Asian making close to $100,000 a year. So these are wealthy, but you don't see much of their influence. They keep their belief systems and their communities very closely knit, and they don't let people in. And of course, there's acupuncturists and Qigong people all over Southern California. I've went to many of them. Certainly, there is a great power there, but I've never found that has really produced great results in terms of healing. You feel wonderful, but it will not. I have, at least my experience is that it doesn't cure if you have serious internal problems, diseases, and other things. If you have disruptions of energies, it's really very dependent upon the person that you can get major relief and healing from it, whether it's back problems or empowering certain organs, etc. The results of these things, even though when you open these meridians and you could feel it, don't seem to, in the end, generate that many great permanent results. But you certainly can feel the energy, and you can feel the energy working. It's quite amazing. Something's going on there, but in terms of that, and you also have to go many, many times to acupuncturists. You're not going to go once or twice unless it's a simple problem to stop. So, it's something you really have to go, a couple of times a week, maybe for a year if you have a serious medical problem. So with that in mind, I hope you enjoyed this. Until next time.